Alright, we already know, as the title suggests, we're going to be remaking, or how Capcom should remake, Devil May Cry 2. One of the worst games ever! Everybody in the fandom knows Devil May Cry 2 is probably the worst in the entirety of the series. Yes, it does have some redeeming elements, but God almighty is it awful. And after the success of Devil May Cry 5, I honestly was going through multiple ideas for a video, like how I should remake, or how Capcom should remake the Argosax fight, how they should do this or that, and then I just settled on how the fuck should they even just remake Devil May Cry 2 from the ground up. And that is what led me to make this video. Now, I will say this video might be split into two parts, and the next one might be a collaborative experience with somebody. If they have time to record some stuff with me and stuff like that. But with their introductions out of the way, let's get into this. Oh, dear Lord. Alright. Remaking Devil May Cry 2. What are Devil May Cry 2's fundamental problems? The story sucks. The gameplay sucks. The bosses suck even more. The only redeeming character, basically the only thing that redeems this game is some arcs that are lost in the story, which is Dante basically surpassing his father's legacy, and also Lucia as a character, which feels underdeveloped slightly, but she's still overall pretty cool character.
Honestly, with the fact that Lucia is a pretty cool character and there's a lot to her, not just being a Trish ripoff like some people try to say, I like the idea of keeping her. And with it being a remake of Devil May Cry 2, I wanted to approach it similarly to Resident Evil 2 Remake, with the idea of having dual protagonists with separate stories that align with one another, which is something Resident Evil 2 Remake did somewhat well, not completely. It did have its flaws from people that played the original, but that's neither here nor there. I honestly, going into my thought process of how Capcom should remake the game, my first area of thought would be gameplay, character, and story. Because the story is kind of eerily simple, so yeah. Let's get into characters. Starting with Dante.
Alright, Dante. DMC2 Dante. Where to begin? His personality, how we would tweak it and make it make sense is make it like the anime. I don't mind that he's a little edgy and a little bit quiet, because when you watch the DMC anime, it kind of basically it goes from DMC 1, he lost his brother again from 3, and he's a little bit more, I feel like this version of Dante is a little bit quiet and a little bit more in a sense of his life where he is at a point where he's lost some things and he's a lot more edgy, a lot more, quiet, but he still is a goofball, and he does have his moments of being a goofball and his wisecracks. The thing is, with DMC 1 Dante, yeah, he had his wisecracks, but the thing is, he wasn't really quiet and have this, very much stone cold look the way DMC 2 or the anime does. And I feel like taking from the anime with how he would be written and stuff like that, kind of like going from RE2 Remake to RE4, yeah.
Even in a gameplay sense, that makes a lot of sense. And speaking of, let's talk about gameplay. Now, this was the most tricky part for me to come up with stuff and even to write certain segments, because most of the time I improvise and also sometimes I'll write. But regardless of that fact, gameplay for DMC2 in the classic version is it's a very big open environment, and it was just grand in scale and didn't have too much with it. And you only had access to 3 swords that really didn't do anything, and mainly you were using guns. Now, my first thought was, okay, let's just go give us 5's gameplay, refine it, and make it more like 2, and call it a day. But then again, that would negate how special 5 is, gameplay-wise. To show a transition from how, flawed 4 was to going here. And then I just thought, well, what were Devil May Cry 2's strengths and weaknesses with its gameplay? There was a lot of weaknesses. There wasn't a lot of strengths. And yes, I'm fully aware of the amulet system. I am fully aware of all that stuff. And I also thought of like the canonical, how his Devil Trigger evolves, usually evolving around demon magic and stuff like that, until it takes shape in 4 of its very own. And I want to kind of take that concept with gameplay and how it evolves. Now, originally, I just thought, well, let's just remake 1. But this isn't about remaking DMC 1. This is about remaking DMC 2. So, the tricky part for me is coming up with gameplay. Because Dante's gameplay has, went through so many different versions, from the way it is in 3 to and 1 to now, then 4 and 5. So going and rewinding that clock back was difficult, because like you go from Resident Evil 2 remake, where it's more item management and stuff like that, to RE4, where it's more action oriented, but some elements of horror and item management as well. And that was the tricky part for me. So eventually I settled on a bit of a balance, with the environment being this almost urban jungle where you're in a cityscape and there's almost no one around besides demons and yourself. I thought, in a sense with the gameplay, DMC2 could basically evolve around using the environment to your advantage. Now, hear me out, let me explain. In a hack and slash, the whole point is to kill enemies and stuff like that. I get that. And I don't want to take away from that. But I also want to have the environment play a role in this, because I feel like, okay, in the story, a demon helicopter, a demon building. Now, we are kind of I want to try to evolve it in this game to be a little bit in between. And while I'm on the subject, I do want to also take a Resident Evil 2 remake approach with the dual protagonist. Something that I thought DMC2 kind of did pretty interestingly. Having 2 characters with different gameplay styles. Resident Evil 2 has something similar with Leon and Claire. Both use guns, both are human characters, but both have a different feel to them with their guns and different ways they kind of shoot and the different enemies they have to fight and bosses. Kind of. And I want to have something similar with Dante and Lucia. With Dante's gameplay, I wanted to take also a mixture of Stellar Blade's gameplay without the Dark Souls element, and also his gameplay from 3 and 1, and mix it together, where his sword gameplay will always feel different depending on which sword he has or which devil arm he has. And yes, I do want to involve a motorcycle in his gameplay, taking a little bit of an element from DMC5 that I really liked. Technically, that element was cut from 2 originally because of Hideaki Mizuno wanting it, but technical limitations, they couldn't have it. Well, with this type of remake, you can take that, but take the demonic motorcycle element out of it, but refine it and make it a little different and interesting for a remake prequel. Because obviously, you can't have him doing the exact same thing he did in 5. And also, even taking some Bayonetta influence with this remake. Now, how do we refine some of the elements, like the charms, or what are they called? I'm sure people will let me know in the comments. But regardless, those. I want to have them be a little bit of something similar to how your styles were in DMC, or Devil May Cry, and 3 more specifically. How the, now I remember, amulets would basically be a kind of change up your gameplay, where you can strategize once you get them. Having them function kind of similarly to styles, but a little different. Them only applying to your devil trigger and also applying to how your guns will attack would be a little interesting. Something that I thought was unique and interesting is sometimes the amulets would affect weapons. And I thought, taking out the style element of for this game, I want to apply the amulet system as the style element, but not completely. I thought it would be a unique, interesting change that also later in the game, if you defeat, once you beat things, you unlock the styles and also have a sub-function of...
Also, for point of reference, I was partially inspired by Guardians of the Galaxy, of all things, with its gameplay with the elemental bits to Star-Lord's guns. So that's what inspired me with the amulet system.
Equipping either the amulet system or the style system, which would function a little bit like how it does in 4, but a little different. Now, this is an optional feature that I thought would be interesting, so make of it what you will. Also, if you're curious on how this idea of the amulets, or how they would be changed and how they would work, here is a little bit of a rough art of the idea, where you can basically control, similar to the style system with the D-pad, you can, once you unlock the different amulets throughout the game, each one would change and basically function differently. Some would have their strengths and weaknesses, so you would have to basically know them and while you fight. And also, with the gameplay, each sword would have a different functionality, different strengths, and different weaknesses. Merciless, if I remember correctly, was the long sword. I also thought about giving it some side abilities evolving around darkness, because why it didn't have that, being a long black blade, is beyond me. I thought that would have been awesome. And having cool various attacks. The longer blade, similar to Cloud's sword in Final Fantasy, would be more slower, more tankier, kind of similar to the axe in the DMC remake. Yes, I know, people hate that, I don't care. The axe was pretty cool, and I figured having some functionality similar to that would make a lot of sense, and with some of its attacks. Also, I kind of see it playing similarly to the Horseman War Sword in Darksiders 1, so yeah. With the aspect of the environment, I was pulling a little bit from the Arkham series, more specifically Arkham Knight, with that type of aspect of using strategy, your environment to your advantage, all of your weapons, and also your amulet system, basically to your advantage. But moving on, I want to talk about Lucia, because she's our dual protagonist. Lucia's gameplay would function similarly to Dante, but I also feel that she could be more acrobatic and a lot more flexible with her gameplay and be a little bit less precision and sword focused and more kind of like, she's the Ahsoka Tano to Anakin Skywalker, so to speak. So if you guys are Star Wars fans, or anyone's watching this that likes Star Wars, you get what I mean. Because I like the idea of her having two, basically dual swords, but pushing it to all her dual swords being 2 is a little pushing it. So I kind of want to change some stuff up with some of her gameplay, but kind of keep it relatively the same kind of mirroring Dante's, but being very different in a gameplay sense and with her story. But we will get into story later in this video, because I want to kind of maybe save that for a sequel video and kind of just go on to bosses. So who knows? But getting into Lucia's gameplay, having her be able to throw daggers is interesting, and that taking the place of guns makes the most sense, and I really like that. But I also think it would be cool to give her a gun-like weapon that is a little different in a certain extent. Because Virgil has his summoning swords and stuff like that, I thought about giving her different other weapons, like on a range front, to kind of close the distance and be a little different. The first one I thought of, with partially inspired by God of War Ragnarok, was a spear-like weapon that, can do a lot of different things. She can use it as a ranged weapon, but also use it with her melee combat, and also do a lot of different stuff with it, even using it in aerial means and other stuff like that, and being very sexy and stylish. Hell, I can even see a move where she kind of slides and dances on it, almost like a stripper. Shut up, get your minds out of the gutter. I think it would be interesting, and damn well it would be cool. Who cares? And it's not the first time a female protagonist has done something similar. Cough banner. So, in that sense, changing up her gameplay slightly, I do like her being more angel-like, and taking a little bit of inspiration on that front from the DMC remake. I wanted to give her some of the weapons that were in that game, and also some new ones in general. Because, why not? I think that would be cool. And I'm going to be saving story for a sequel video, but I want to talk about bosses. And more specifically, fixing the final boss first, and we'll talk about the other ones later, and how each campaign would be different, and they would have their different set of bosses. Their final boss would be different, which is something I want to keep, but I also want to fix a lot of things with the different bosses, but more specifically, Dante's final boss, Argosax. God, I hate this boss. God, I hate it. And I want to get it. I don't want to go into a rant of why I hate it, but I want to talk about how we will be fixing it in this remake, if Capcom was to remake it. So, I first want to get into the flaws of the boss, and then I want to get into how to fix them and make it better, and make it make sense, and make it work. First, let's get into the plus side. The first stage of the boss, I want to still keep as a collage-page of all the bosses in the DMC games, from Phantom to Griffin to the ones from Lucia's campaign and from your campaign in this game. I like the idea of Argosax the Chaos living up to his namesake, being a collage-page of forms, but I also like the idea of that should apply to his attacks in that form, and also in basically basically in his second form as well. So what I thought of was taking a bit of inspiration from the 7 Deadly Sins in Darksiders 3, and also looking at the boss as a whole. I thought, okay, how do we fix this? So taking a trip down memory lane with Spider-Man Edge of Time, I thought the collage-page of all the monsters and their attacks needs to be done better. And we're changing up the battle arena, because fuck you, that's why. First, an obvious thing, I want to change up the battle arena to be a little bit different, and also because why not? I want it to be a little bit of a circular arena, but I also want it to be filled with like this dense fog, and there's crystals on the ground, or embedded into the ground. These unique crystals, and this area is uniquely different. extremely different than the usual realm parts of hell that you've seen before. And it's something that I wanted to encapsulate on, as this part of hell that you're fighting Argosax is where he is the strongest. He's been imprisoned where he's the strongest, but he can't break free because of the whatever. And even though this is his realm, so to speak, of hell, or this is his domain where his rule is the strongest, I want to kind of encapsulate that with, the boss fight in a sense. Now, getting into it, my thought process with the creatures is it's not bad to basically have a collage page of all your greatest hits in one globbiest thing. The problem is that it just sits there. Now, I want this fight to be 3 stages. Let me explain why, and then you'll get into your complaining in a minute. The first stage is basically its blob form. The blob form sits in the ground and basically functions similarly to the way it does in DMC2, the original, but with some minor tweaks to make it a little bit more entertaining. But then when it gets off the ground, that is when things are getting serious and it's a lot more difficult. Kind of like with the bird creature from DMC5, and basically Malthus. It's kind of similar to that, but a little different. Taking that with the fight from DMC, the remake with Bob Bargain, kind of similar to that, and fusing that together. Something I also want to encapsulate is that each of the monsters, yes, they have different attacks and they fight you with, their attacks, but I want fusion attacks. So if you are trying to kill the Phantom Head, sometimes it'll have attacks of fusing with Griffin's attacks. Like maybe you'll have like lava bursting through the floor and you'll see electric going through the floor. And it'll have collage attacks with each of the different creatures, which is something that, if I'm being honest, I didn't understand why they didn't add in the first place. It always bothered me that, why didn't they do that? It would make the most sense. Even when you're fighting it, it makes the most sense to have basically these fusion attacks. Why they don't do it is honestly beyond me. And the way of the creature would fight in its second stage, when it's more active, would be this collage page of even spawning mini enemies, maybe, but I doubt that we can go that far. I think having it be this monstrosity of all your enemies, kind of taking some inspiration from the symbiote mixed with Doc Ock from Edge of Time, and its attacks, like fusion attacks together to attack Dante and kill him. And also when it's, gets up in its second stage. So maybe we can have it be two, like instead of a 3-stage fight, it could be 2 stages, but for the monster form, it's it doing what it did originally, and it being standing up. Another thought process that I had was similar to if you guys watch the Owl House, if you guys remember the lost creatures or whatever, the talisman kind of being this cluster flock of souls in Belos's head, I kind of thought the demons would be in a similar predicament, and you could hear them in the fight screaming, just kill us, kill us. This is agony. This is, we didn't want this, or stuff like that. And they're attacking you in a sense just to kill them. They don't care. They're like, that's something I want to think would be cool. And also the way it would fight, when it is in the second different stages. I don't think you can rely only on guns. You can also rely on the crystals on the ground to also boost your attacks and basically empower your amulets a little bit more. So if you're standing on a green crystal, it empowers your health, and if you slam it and break it, it turns into mini green orbs that restore your health and stuff like that. And also, different crystals would do different effects, and also, other stuff as well. Now, moving on to the actual Argosax part of this fight. Now, this is where things get really interesting. This is where the biggest changes happen. Now, something I do like is that Argosax is this flaming demon angel looking thing. It's, split between a man flaming form and a female flaming form. The female has sometimes whips, and the man has his, turns from, sword-like hands. And I thought, damn, that's cool. But when you actually fight him, he's very the embodiment of despair. That's something I thought, the despair of all these souls and demons and stuff. And some of his attacks are just kind of lame. He doesn't do anything. And I want to change that. And with these crystals on the ground, I was partially inspired by, one, elementals from the Pixar movie, and also, some other stuff. Also, DMC5 with the way Dante fights in his Sin Devil Trigger form. So, what my thought process is basically this fight would be more challenging. This is where Argosax would be at his strongest. Changing up the lords of stuff and the way he fights. In the base game, he just has some lock-on attacks, he tries to attack you, and there's really not a whole lot he does. I want to change that. The crystals that you were using against him, basically you would be using them against each other. He can gain strength from them too, and fight you in different ways. For starters, with Argosax being partially flamed, I thought he could basically, when he hovers over those crystals, they would change his form, which would also change his attacks, making him even more dangerous each time. Different attacks and different patterns, from swords to different ways he fights with each one. And it would be almost this stalemate, and he could even summon and use flaming holograms, if you remember. I wouldn't call them holograms, but forms. If you remember Harry Potter with the, I can't remember the spell, but basically Fiendfire, basically, think of that, with the embodiment of the despair of the demons that from the game. So, basically, a flaming form for Phantom, and basically Griffin, and a lot of other things. Also, with the female and male form, they would have different attacks, but they would also be different with the different crystals. So the way they would fight would be completely different depending on when they hover over a crystal and all that. And if I'm being honest, that would change up this fight drastically, making it so much more better and so much more harder to fight. It would change up the patterns, and it would make it so much more difficult. So you would both be trying to use these crystals on the ground in your environment to your advantage to fight one another. And also having to worry about these fired forms of the different bosses of the past. And also, these crystals would affect those bosses as well. So you would see even different attacks depending on the flaming form of it. So if you have a blue flaming Griffin or a blue flaming Phantom, they would fight differently or try to attack you differently. And it would be so cool. And it would change up the gameplay drastically, and it would have you thinking on the fly. And it would honestly make this version of the DMC2 final boss so much more better. And hope you guys like some of the art in this section. But with that out of the way, hopefully you guys enjoy the video. Make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, all that jazz. And peace out. Bye-bye.